Previously, on the way of the kings of the east, we read the prophecy written in Revelation 16:12 of how the great river Euphrates would dry up so that the way of the kings of the east could be prepared. We saw that dams are being constructed along both the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, restricting the flow of water into Iraq, resulting in tensions in the area with no apparent compromise in sight. We also saw how the elders of Israel went to the prophet Samuel, rejecting both Samuel and Yahweh, and asked to have a king appointed to lead them, just like all the other nations. They still wanted a king to rule over them, even after Samuel warned them of how the king would behave toward them. King Saul was the first king, then King David, followed by King Solomon. Remember the history of King Saul. He was rejected by Yahweh from being a king because Saul rejected the righteous priests of Yahweh and turned against Yahweh's laws. The reason there were wars in Israel was the kings of the east wanted to get rid of the righteous priests and those who would follow in the ways of Yahweh. Around 984 BCE, after the death of King Solomon, Israel and Judah became divided and were at war with one another. This was only 174 years after the elders rejected Samuel and Yahweh at Ramah. Before Solomon's death, Yahweh brought peace to Israel and the surrounding nations under the leadership of King Solomon, who was being guided by a righteous high priest, Azariah, son of Zadok. Solomon reigned over all of the kingdoms from the river Euphrates to the land of the Philistines, as far as the borders of Egypt. These kingdoms were subject to Solomon all the days of his life. Yahweh gave Solomon wisdom, exceedingly great insight, and a breadth of understanding as infinite as the sands upon the seashore. The wisdom of Solomon surpassed the wisdom of all of the men of the east. 1 Kings 4:29 through 30. According to historical and authoritative sources, the word translated men, or children in the King James Version, is the Hebrew word ben, and refers to kings, sons of Yahweh. The root means to build, or builder of a family name, as an institute. This is the first place where the kings of the east are mentioned. In Genesis chapter 10, we see the family of Noah and his sons. Verse 6 shows us the sons of Ham. The first one is Cush. Verse 7 shows us the sons of Cush. Verse 8 shows that Cush begot Nimrod. But notice, Nimrod is not listed as a son of Cush, but Cush begot Nimrod. Nimrod was a tyrant who deceived, who turned against Yahweh, and the beginning of his kingdom was Babel. What Cush begot was actually institutes of higher learning. They were established in Babel, in the land of Shinar, and branched out to other places. This is the wisdom of the East that Solomon surpassed. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the East. The word they shows that it was not a single person, but a whole group under the name of Nimrod. This was something that sprang up in the family that Yahweh had brought out of Egypt. And that family of higher learning looked down upon Samuel and did not want to serve Yahweh. Because of the lust for money and personal gain, they turned a religion into a commercial operation. These were the same ones that would later become the Pharisees, Sadducees, and Essenes, who would later control the temple. These were the leaders of the higher institutes that began in Genesis and will continue until the end. Remember, Solomon's wisdom surpassed the wisdom of the men or the kings of the East and all of the wisdom of Egypt. The higher institutes of learning crept in from Solomon and his businesses. He did business with all sorts of nations. They trusted Solomon because they knew he followed the laws of Yahweh, and Solomon in turn began to trust them. While these schools taught very few beneficial things, their main objective was to secretly and deceptively teach rebellion against the laws of Yahweh. These schools were called higher institutes of learning. How could it be that anyone would ever turn against the way of Yahweh and turn to God worship? The lust for wealth, personal gain, and power. And out of those institutes came leaders of the people, by the people, and against Yahweh. The same thing is seen going on in the kings of the earth today. The students that come from these academies set up by the Catholic Church in America that train officers in the United States, these are the ones who make president, make up the courts of the land, and hold political offices throughout the world. Illegal lust is also fostered in these institutes of higher learning. These institutes train in careers with the goal of getting rich in this lifetime. The lust for money, power, and land lead to nations raising armies, going to other nations and taking their land, resources, and money. History shows that Nimrod was described as a tyrant who deceived. Remember, Nimrod was not a person, not a son of Cush, but a system of deception to turn people against Yahweh and his righteous ways. This brought about Babylon, which, according to historical and authoritative sources, means confusion. History shows that these institutes rapidly spread in the direction of the great Euphrates and in the direction of Rome. This is what is pictured as the Tower of Babel, these institutes of higher learning. This wasn't a physical tower to literally reach into the heavens, for what would its purpose be? In fact, if you look at the institutes of higher learning throughout the world today, they have one thing in common. They have, as a part of their architecture, a tower, usually centrally located on campus. By putting all of the information gathered together so far, we can see that these institutes of higher learning were set up from the beginning with the intent to turn people away from the righteous way of Yahweh. They have been deceived into thinking that they have all the answers, that their knowledge is above that of Yahweh. The result is confusion. Confusion that is clearly seen in the world today. The lust and greed for wealth has led to the defilement of mankind's food supply. Diseases are now resistant to the drugs used to fight them. Many of these diseases have mutated and now have the ability to penetrate the blood-brain barrier. The cumulative result is that rational decisions cannot be made because these diseases and parasites affect the very thought processes of man. Babylon, confusion, is the result of these institutes of higher learning. Both our political leaders and religious leaders are all affected by this system. The early Roman Catholic Church actually celebrated the Sabbath as the seventh day of the week to begin with. It wasn't until the Emperor Constantine that the Catholic Church decided to change the day of worship from the seventh day of the week, Saturday, to the first day of the week, Sunday. History shows that it was Constantine who changed it. Constantine brought forth a lot of this from the institutes of higher learning. He was actually one of these Pharisees that actually brought forth this in the Catholic Church. One of the great apostles was trained in these very institutes of higher learning. Who was it? Which of the 12 tribes did he come from? Where was he born, and what laws did he teach and enforce? Join us next time for these and many more shocking revelations when we continue to examine the way of the kings of the East.